Oh, it's time. It's time. Graves was here not only on time, but early. This is like a monumental moment. Monumental. Warhammer, here's the thing. I actually like Warhammer. I never got as into it as I would have liked. But I respect the game. Good game. I saw that there was like a new, and sorry if I'm wrong, but I think there's a newer one that was released on Steam. I'm hoping my life changes at some point and I can fit, 30 minutes, an hour of video games in during the week. Because the Warhammer looks pretty cool. It looks pretty cool. I will admit. Yeah, okay, cool. I thought so. I thought I had seen it on there. Every once in a while, the most video games I get in is like looking through the Steam library for 10 minutes here and there. I'll look through it and be like, God, some of this stuff looks so cool. And now I have a computer that could handle it, like genuinely could handle anything. And I would like to be able to do it. I just doubt I will be able to anytime soon. But maybe that will change. So tonight, Kelly is in Discord audience. Kelly, just in case you don't know, we're on YouTube. The Discord channel you're in right now is just if you're looking to come on and speak, which you appear to be a newer member, so you wouldn't be able to. So I'd recommend going to YouTube. So if you go to the very top in Discord on the left where the channels are, and you click the events tab, you'll see that there's an event that is right now. And actually the times are off because of daylight savings time. So I need to change that. The time is wrong. However, the link is correct. So if you go to the events tab in Discord at the top of the channels, you can click the YouTube link there and it'll pull you over to where the live stream on YouTube is. If you're looking to just listen and not see what's on the screen, then you're good in the Discord channel there. But just in case you don't know, because I don't recognize you. Tonight, we are going over a few things, I guess. So, but if the thesis is this, the thesis is, should women submit to men who are not being godly men? And so there's some things that, in my opinion, you have to define. What do some of these things mean? So we'll go over some of those things. But the thesis is, should a woman submit to a man who is essentially not upholding the values that the Bible depicts for what men should be within a relational context? So what does the Bible say men should be within a relationship? And then if they are not upholding that as men, should they submit, or should the woman submit to that man? My opinion is no, which is confusing because I'm very much about traditional values. I'm very much about the submission context of the Bible. I think it's very good. I think it's very wholesome, and I don't view it the way that it's depicted a lot today. So we'll talk about that. But we have a member in Discord, Rodriguez, who disagrees. She thinks, and I'll let her speak for herself, but my understanding of what she believes is that even if a man's not upholding his part, Rodriguez, I just invited you. Even if a man's not upholding his part, the woman should still submit. So that's kind of the, call it debate conversation. And then we'll go into some things within that. All right. So a couple things first. If you do not know, we have a Discord. This is the Discord. There's a link in the top, in the pinned comment in the live chat. There is also a link in the description of every video that goes up, whether it's a live stream or not. If nothing else, the Discord is good to know when we're doing the live streams, if that's all you care about. The times are off here because of daylight savings time, so I need to change this. But we do a Thursday, we do a Saturday, which is mostly like world news, cultural news, and then Sunday is just a Bible study. So we do 3 a week. I'll update the times in there. Otherwise, Discord, everybody just kind of talks. It's a constant chattering of wildly interesting stuff, actually. So if you're interested, go in and join that. It's free. It'll always be free. So to start, what is submission? I feel like that needs to kind of be explained first. So the Greek word submit, the way that we translate to submit in English, is a combination of two words. One word means position under, and another word, the other word, means arrange or to put in place. So we see that the true biblical submission is an active role that we choose to take on as wives. If you are a woman and you choose to get married, that is a role that you choose to take. It's a voluntary role. It's not required. If you choose to get married within a Christian context, it becomes your voluntary choice, but biblically, it would be required. This is to recognize two things. You have a higher authority that is God, and in a sense, you have a higher authority that is your husband, biblically. So the main place to get our biblical expression of this would be Ephesians 5, it'd be 21 through 29. But I have a couple questions that I feel like need to be kind of included with this. And if anybody needs me to repeat any of them at any time, I can do that. But the things that I feel like before you can even have this conversation are the following. What is a Christian? You have to define that. Otherwise, how do you have a conversation about should a Christian woman submit to a Christian husband? Well, what is a Christian? What is actually a Christian? I feel like people would kind of have arguments about that even. But if you can come to a reasonable explanation of what a Christian is, then you can have the conversation. The other one would be, what is marriage? Is marriage getting a legal document signed by the state in which you live? Most Christians hopefully would say no, that really has nothing to do with actual marriage. It didn't exist in the same sense that it does today, that that existed during the time the Bible was written. So what is a Christian? What is marriage? And then I suppose we'll start there. But the other two main ones for me are our thesis, which is should a woman submit to a non-Christian husband? To make it more specific, we know women should submit to Christian husbands. Should a woman submit to a non-Christian husband? Say Rodriguez marries a guy. Maybe he says he's Christian in the beginning, maybe he doesn't, but they get married either way. Is she responsible to submit to that man? Should he not be Christian today? Another question I feel like we can talk about. The last one that I have is, if a man says he's a Christian, does that make him a Christian? And I guess it would go for women too, but in the context of tonight's conversation, more so on the man part. We're assuming the woman tonight is a Christian regardless. So if a man says he's Christian, does that make him Christian? Is saying it making it? Does saying it make it true? Those are some things to just kind of ponder. And like I said, if you want, I can throw them in there. Rodriguez said I did marry a guy like that. So then that'll be good. So I want to read this first, and then Rodriguez and I, maybe, unless you have a different opinion, I feel like we can just kind of give our piece, and then we'll go from there. Anybody else who wants to come in and talk, you are more than welcome. Ladies, specifically, because I don't want these conversations to be male dominated, and neither does Rodriguez. And tonight is a great night, specifically, to have more women come on. So if you're comfortable, go in the voice channel in the Discord, and then just raise your hand, and then when there's a good breaking point, we'll bring you in. But I do hope that some of you get more comfortable, unless you're, no pressure. But I think it'd be great. So the first one here, this is Ephesians 5, 21 through 29. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church. There's that. Rodriguez, would you like to kind of give your piece, or do you want me to explain my part?
I'm so sorry. I'm still eating dinner. You can give your part first.
Okay. So my general belief about this, and we have some other verses and stuff we can go through, but my general belief about this, just off of this, is that we get a depiction of what was the purpose and placement of Christ. We get a brief picture of that, of what his purpose was, This doesn't include much of the purpose, so you have to go elsewhere for that. But what is the placement of Christ? This gives a very clear representation of what the placement of Christ is. Just as Christ does for the church, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but Christ will die for the church. We know that from here. Christ is the head of the church. Christ will die for the church. And then we get the depiction of what a man is, what a husband specifically is, which is essentially to mirror Christ, but for his family. So Christ is head of the church, which is the collection of Christians all together, including husbands, wives, and kids. And he should be willing to die for it because he did. The depiction, therefore, or the depiction there of a man after a husband is to mirror that, but within your small church, which is your family. So men should be willing to die for the church. They should love their family, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's where we get the indication that men, if need be, should give their life up for their family. Then you get the depiction of what a woman is, what a wife is, and that is to submit to the husband. And then it's not depicted clearly here, but it is elsewhere collectively through aggregate, that they are to display the former to the rest of the family. So it's this trickle-down effect of Christ being over everything, man being over the family, wife being over the children. My belief here, in short, and then Rodriguez can go, is that we are given very clear direction of what men are to be. And then only then do we get clear direction on what women are to be in response to that. But it's always in response. Men are this, therefore women are that. So my understanding through aggregate, which means collecting everything in the Bible together, would be that it's an order of operations. So if the order of operations is broken at the top, everything else will falter. And whether that's voluntary or involuntary can be a conversation. But my belief is that women are to do that because men are already doing this. If men are not doing this, it breaks the order of operations. So why would a woman do that? It would be respectable in some scenarios. It would also be becoming a victim in others. And that's kind of my problem with it. And maybe some of that comes from personal bias with me because I've known a lot of women who continued being good wives and then were abused because of it. And they gave in to the abuse because they believed biblically they were tied to this. I'll leave it there. So Rodriguez, you can come in and then we'll just kind of have a conversation from that. Unless you're still eating.
Okay, sorry. No. I mean, I am, but it's okay. Yeah. So I guess part of my first question would be, what happens, like, if you flip the script, right? Hang on, I need to log off because there's an echo. Hang on.
You're good.
Yeah, on your end, but not mine. So what happens, like, let's just say hypothetically, right? If it's reversed, right? And the woman is not being submissive, right? But the man is being yielding and submissive to God. So does that mean that the man, the husband, needs to stop his part because the woman isn't doing her part?
Well, so
I just have that question. Aside from the entire subject, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
yeah, so I think that would be my answer would be the order of operations thing. So I feel like a lot I would believe differently if that didn't exist. But the order of operations is pretty consistent whenever husbands and wives and men and women are talked about. So that's where a lot of it comes from. If that weren't there, I might actually believe differently about this. But it is. So that's kind of why I see that way.
All right, I get it. Does your opinion change at all if children are in the picture?
About what specifically?
The submitting part.
I believe.
Because
go ahead.
Children are watching, right?
Yeah, agreed. No, I think it becomes much more nuanced at that point. Yeah, I think I would need to have a longer conversation with you about it if kids were involved in it. Yeah,
because that's a different situation.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it makes it tougher for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I and I definitely understand what you're saying about the abuse stuff because I can empathize with that. I've been there. Um, so I feel like there was a lot of maybe circumstances and situations where I felt led to submit and others that I didn't. Um, and my God, I haven't been married to this guy in like 15 years, so I'm a little bit rusty. But like for example, he was always trying to figure out ways to get out of work, right? And he was military. And so sometimes his supervisors would call to make sure he was actually at where he was at. So he would say, hey, they're going to call, the house phone. You got to make sure you answer and you tell them this. And I'm like, no, like, I'm not doing that, and certain things like that. So that part, I guess I wasn't quote unquote submissive. I would just not answer the phone. I guess maybe I could have taken a different direction and answered and just say he's flat out lying. But I didn't do that. But I think the part is I just don't think overall two wrongs make a right. And I can't find, like, I hear what you're saying in terms of the order, right? Husband to God, wife to husband, and whatnot. But I guess my question is there's no part indicating that it's like null and void if there's a gap in submission.
No,
That's kind of
there's not. But so I guess
right.
take it back to your example right there. So why did you choose in that scenario to not be submissive?
Well, I wasn't gonna lie. I mean, he was just trying to get out of work, and he was really lazy. So,
So
I just didn't. Yeah.
maybe that's a good topic though. So then when is it right for a woman to disobey her husband? Because that would be completely ignoring the piece of submission. So then, and it would relate to kind of what you just said, in my opinion, where you're saying basically, and I agree that there is no specific point in the Bible that indicates when women should submit and when they shouldn't.
Right.
Or not even that. What you actually said was that there's nothing in the Bible that says there should be a gap in submission. So there's nothing that says
Right.
what I think, which is that women shouldn't submit if the man's not being godly. But what I would say is that there's also nothing about that. So then why would you
True.
choose to do that? So I guess unpack it then, because I agree with you, but then
Okay.
unpack it. Because I think you are like probably most women, where sometimes you choose to submit and sometimes you don't. So when is it valid and when is it not?
Um. No, I mean, I think overall I do, but again, like I said, my ex-husband is actually abusive, so of course I'm not gonna, And unfortunately, I fall under the umbrella where, like, we met in a Christian high school. We were high school sweethearts, and then he started questioning his faith, and then eventually hated it. Um. So it was kind of a weird step-by-step process.
Was
And
he a
I will.
Christian when you disobeyed? Just out of curiosity. Would you say he was
Um.
actively a Christian at that point or no?
I don't think I really, as weird as it sounds, I don't think I disobeyed when he was a quote unquote Christian. It was so weird. Like, we never fought, never had an argument, never raised his voice or,
But he
fist or
told you to
anything like that.
lie. He told you to lie, and you
Once
basically
he
said
was,
no.
once he was kind of, already at that point, where I think he was already violent at that point. So, um,
Like away from the faith, or still with the faith but violent.
no, 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 no. It kind of all happened at the same time. So it was like, already violent and not with the faith.
Okay, so I think that's a good point. So then these are the nuances that I kind of planned for, which is like, so then at that point, is he a Christian? Because I think that changes the conversation. Are women required to submit to non-Christian husbands?
I mean, I think that it does. I I think it's a factor. I don't know how much it actually changes the conversation because again, it doesn't specify that in scripture. I think, and I'm sorry, I was trying to hurry up and get to the scripture before this started, but I was running behind schedule too. But I know there's a portion of scripture, of course, it's in the New Testament where it talks about if a husband isn't saved and how like the woman can win him over. Do you know what scripture I'm talking about? Maybe it's in Corinthians. Um,
Yeah, First
First
Corinthians
Corinthians
7.
7:13, maybe.
Yeah, it looks like so. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. So the one thing I would just point out for clarity is that this is largely due to children. So, or
Right.
would we stick with the child aspect, or would it be also without the child? Because the whole context of that is
Which I did have.
just about the
We
kids.
did have,
So then
yeah.
it would relate to your example then, yeah, for sure.
Mhm. Um, yeah, so I think that was a huge factor. I'm sorry, what was the example you gave before I pointed the scripture? I'm sorry.
The example.
Or the question.
So the questions were, I mean, one of them was, should a wife submit to a non-Christian husband?
Again, I feel like it depends on um what the husband is, I guess what his agenda is.
But that's kind of like my argument when you say it kind of
Okay, so for
depends.
for example, I'm gonna tell you something. Like my ex-husband and I initially agreed that we wanted our children to attend Christian private schools. That was something that was always like, in stone for us, and that we were going to do whatever it takes to do that. Then eventually, after we're divorced, he takes me to court, and supposedly I violated his religious rights by taking them to a private Christian school without his consent or permission. I don't know how that works though, post divorce. Um, but hmm, I mean, I don't regret it. I wouldn't have changed it, whether we were married or not. But I think it kind of goes back a little bit to what citizens have to decide when their government. I mean, I understand we're not in a theocracy, but overall, when our government isn't really um, going in the direction that God would want legally, right? Because legality doesn't always equal morality,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So I think that's kind of where you get into, splitting hairs
I
when it
don't
comes to different things
I,
like that.
I don't think that's splitting hairs though, do you?
It can.
How so? Because
Mm,
the Romans verse, yeah, I assume is what it's Romans
right, right.
13. Yeah, so Romans 13, obey the government, for God is the one who put it there. There is no government anywhere that God has not placed in power. So and I feel like I've complained about this a few times, but it's yes, civic duty, yada yada. But if it disagrees with God's morality, there are way more indications in the Bible of Israel and others disobeying governing authorities because they disobeyed with God. So I think again, it's like an aggregate thing where the one verse in Romans is severely outweighed by other verses in the Bible where people of God disobeyed civil authority in order to obey God. So I think it's one of those verses just because I don't think it's really splitting hairs. I think it's just people just don't care about what the whole Bible says. They care about the one verse that they're kind of fixated on. And there's way
Yeah,
more indicating you should disobey civic authority if that civic authority disobeys God's moral authority or commands. But I get what you're saying about like there's a point where our government turns and then it's a conversation at least about whether what should Christians do in that space. But then
right. Say the least. So far.
but so why is that different though in a marriage? Because I agree with you, but I think that would also translate to a marriage. Yeah, especially I mean, relate the man to kind of your government. The government is the authority over us
Right, right, right.
collectively. The man is the authority over the family collectively. So if if the government strays, you can disobey him. But if the man strays, you can't disobey him.
Yeah, to some degree, though, right? So I'm trying to, like I said, it's been a long time, so I'm trying to remember.
You're good.
I do remember at one point, early on, he didn't want my children to go to like church or anything like that. So, um, I honestly didn't push it. I think it was a mistake, obviously. And then I remember my daughter going to kindergarten, my oldest, and she actually heard about Jesus from her kindergarten teacher. And I felt so bad because she didn't know who Jesus was. And that was kind of like my wake up call, you know? Um, and so I started going to church, and I remember him kind of like somewhat being like, okay, like whatever with it. And then whenever my daughter would bring up, certain questions about what happened in church or Jesus or anything like that, he would kind of get frustrated and say, like, okay, well, just go ask your mom, Um, and I do remember, I'm trying to think, there was one church that I did like here in Vegas when I first got here, but it was a nighttime service and it was in a really bad neighborhood. And he told me like I wasn't allowed to go there at night in that bad neighborhood because it was going to place me and my daughter in danger.
Yeah.
And I actually listened, and so I decided to look other places at different times. And so yeah, I mean, so to some degree I listened to, I mean, there was a lot of compromise. So
So generalize it. Generalize it. When should any wife, you, Kat, for me, Ruth, whoever, when should you and when should you not? The example, the one you gave is where when he asked you to lie, you
right,
refuse
and
you
I did.
refused to do that, and that was on
Right.
moral. And Ghost had said earlier because he's asking her to explicitly break a commandment, which I think is the easy answer to that. Yeah, I think you did the right thing because that is a scenario where the government wants us to do something that is in opposition to God's moral law. That's when we shouldn't. And when a man asks you to do something that is in opposition with God's moral law, you shouldn't. Because the whole concept is that men should be acting as Christ acts. So that's kind of my point, is that when men, that is an example of a man not acting as Christ should act. Therefore, you didn't submit, and I don't think you should.
Right. But I mean, I could have taken it a step further, right? I could have picked up the phone and said, hey, my husband told me to tell you X, Y, and Z, and I'm not going to tell you that because it's not true.
But that would be even more so of what I'm saying. You kind of took the subtle out, but still did the right thing, but still you disobeyed your husband. Doing that is taking like the hard out by not only disobeying him, but also like telling on him. So it's even more so a disobey to your husband, which I think is the right. I think you did the right thing, but that's like
Well,
that's kind of the point. I think where the nuance is with your situation with that is like maybe there's an argument of whether he was a Christian at the time, and maybe that would change things.
yeah, I would say around that time. Questionable because that's when things were kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, I think a little weird.
Oh, you're cutting out a little bit, but that's so then it's the question of okay, so now the woman's married to a non-Christian man. One, probably not the smartest thing to do, but maybe he lost his faith after marriage. Then
Or he put on a mask.
or he put on yeah, or he lied. But in which case I'd still argue he's not acting Christ-like. So then
Right.
I don't think you as the woman are held to submit the way Christ intended. It's a trickle down
To some
effect.
degree, though, right, Joe? Like, to some degree, you have to believe that a wife would submit to some degree.
But, so then play it out. To what degrees exactly? Because you have to be able to put some parameters on it. So say he's asking you, he's having you do things that don't break God's moral law. Would you do all of them, or would there still
You're
be
gonna have to give
nuance?
me some scenarios and examples because I haven't been married in a hot minute. So,
Okay, let's see. Hold on, because they're throwing some stuff out here.
okay, good.
Obey your government gates, keep your head down enough to stay alive to fulfill the mission. Okay, guys in the chat, gals in the chat, what are some things a non-Christian husband might ask a wife to do that aren't necessarily breaking like the Bible or moral law? What are some things that he might have you do? I mean, how about just like a stupid one? You gave an example of like which way I know it wasn't exactly this, but he's telling you to go a certain way home, and you don't want to for whatever reason. You think your way's better. You think you're going to save time. You think your way's safer, but he directs you to do a certain thing with that. Would you follow it blind because he told you
Yeah,
to?
to some degree, yeah.
So why?
It's a little bit different when they're violent.
Sure, but take the violence out
And
because
you don't want to
that's
be
not
okay,
most
okay, okay. Take
people's
that off.
general.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I'm not that confrontational. I know you guys may completely disagree, but to me, it's like not that serious. So I probably would go that way unless I absolutely knew, like it leads to I don't know a dead end construction or whatever the case may be. There was a couple times though, if I'm completely honest, where being submissive, I think, got me into some trouble. I'm not gonna lie. Um, and that's where I kind of say like splitting hairs. Like he was really jealous and I mean typical kind of like, abuser stuff. Like this is embarrassing to say.
You don't have to say it.
No. It's just like petty, weird little things. Like if I went to the store, Target, grocery store, whatever, um, so bad. He said that I would have to he would like check the receipts first of all to see how much I spent, right?
Okay.
And then he would want to see that if the cashier was a girl, because if it was a guy, he thought that meant I was flirting with them.
Okay. So I'll just
There
add
was no fidelity or anything like that, but
there.
stuff like that is where I kind of regret. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. For
Or
sure.
yeah, and there's a couple stuff like which is technically how abuse works. They do things, bit by bit, piece by piece. So yeah,
So
and it's really hard to get godly counsel on things like that. So
I don't see
even today,
why. What do you
why? Because
mean?
I don't think the church isn't even doing a good job acknowledging that this shit exists.
That's fair. Okay. Yeah. I find that just absolutely freaking wild though. The number of women I've talked to in similar situations is astronomical. So
Mhm.
but I believe you because of what I know about the church as a whole. So it's a very, very sad thing. So say no actual abuse was taking place. Yeah, I still think your scenario is probably more. It's very, very common for sure, but
Right.
it's on the more severe end of the spectrum. I think there's
For
probably
sure.
more scenarios where kind of they lack that control, but maybe a minor version of it where like he still wants, let's say, just the receipt. He wants to see the receipt. He wants to know how
Mhm.
much money you spent and what you spent it on. The sex of the cashier doesn't matter, none of the rest of it. In Do you think women are they have to do that? Do you think they're obligated to do that? Whether he's a Christian or not, I guess first. Are they
Mhm.
obligated to do that? Even if it makes them feel uncomfortable? Do they have to? Because he said so.
Um.
And again, this is a man who is not acting
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Christ-like. Okay.
Yeah. And that was also a struggle. Like I remember him getting upset. Like you spent this much on groceries. And then I would get upset. I'm like, okay, well, here's the grocery list. Here's what I actually got according to the receipts. So you tell me what the problem is. Could I have prevented this? No? All right, then you're going to have to figure things out and work on your budget. That probably wouldn't be very submissive. But yeah.
Okay, Ruth said something pretty good. She said, "If I know my husband is being unreasonable with the request, I will confront him. Arguments would ensue. Would Christ-like husbands not be unreasonable ever?"
We need to define unreasonable. Do you have the definition of submissive? Since we're
Yeah, so I'm just
oh
gonna
my
read.
god.
No, you're good. I'll read it again. So the in our context, submission is it's the Greek. It's two words basically, but the Greek word submit is a combination of two. So the first is a position under, and the other in Greek means to arrange or to put in place. So it's the biblical submission model is an active role a woman chooses to take as a wife to recognize the higher authority that God has set up and that she should be subject to, which then makes perfect sense when you read it in context. It's one of the ones that isn't conflicting with context, because then you get Ephesians 5 and you get exactly that model. It's a position under, and it's arranged and put in place. And the position under is Christ, husband, wife, and then family at the bottom. In order, not in value or meaning, obvious.
My God, there's so much gray just with that statement alone.
In the hierarchy?
Yeah, I just think about everything, like there's just so much gray.
What's gray about that, though? The order of operations has gray? I agree,
No,
there's a lot
no,
of
but
gray.
the duties of it.
For sure. So
that's
then,
where it gets kind of gray, and then
but then you have to aggregate, which is the part that most people are too lazy to do, and it's the part that we do, and it's really frustrating, but we got to do it. That's when you collect. Jesus. You have to collect everything and go through it. And there's something like between 50 and 75, in my opinion, applicable sections in scripture where you can kind of aggregate from. The reason you have to be super careful is because you get a few of them from First Corinthians, right? And can you apply First Corinthians to an everyday relationship? In my opinion, most of it, no, because there was very specific stuff going on for the church, and it's not a general text. It's a text to that group who had massive freaking problems, which makes it more confusing. So then you have to go through the specific verses in First Corinthians and decide, okay, is this general context that can be applied to a normal everyday Christian, or is this Paul venting about things that these specific people are doing and maybe they don't apply across the board? It's what makes it really difficult. So I agree, there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray, which is the whole, the word is adiaphora that I throw out all the time, adiaphora, where it's essentially just that, is that we live in, as Christians, you live in gray. It's a hell of a lot of gray all the time. So then you just have to kind of piece it together the best you can. And I don't think there's like a very strict, I'm right or you're right, or I'm wrong or you're wrong. I think a lot of it is like, it is nuanced. Are there kids involved? Because I think the woman is held to a different standard in that position, but not to the husband. It's for the kid's benefit. So in some cases, I think she should still submit, but only in context of the kids. So if the kids are at school and the husband is the whole time, all past 2 years has been unchristlike, maybe abandoned the faith, maybe didn't, but either way, he's not filling his Ephesians 5 role. I don't think she should in most things. And then it's like, is it reasonable? Is it not reasonable? Like Ruth said. And then you have to define that, which makes it confusing too. But I think in the scenario that we're talking about, where a man is not filling his role, but the woman has every desire to fill her role, the hierarchy is broken. So I think, are there kids involved? Sure. And if there's kids involved, when the kids are around, I think she should, within reason. So if he's asking her to do things like your husband asks you to do that break God's moral code, no. Just like if the government does, I don't think you should, because that's what the Bible says. We have more examples in the Bible of people breaking the hierarchy, breaking submission, because it doesn't align with God's objective. More. Go ahead.
But wouldn't it be more beyond moral code? Because like, if we just take that example alone of what I gave about the receipts, right? That's technically not breaking any moral code.
Sure. So then that's yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because that, you're right, it doesn't. So then it would default to, for me, it would default to the original disagreement between us. Whereas no, he's not asking you to break moral code, but is he acting Christ-like? I don't think that's Christ-like. Control is not Christ-like, in my opinion.
Okay, so then the difference, I guess the standard wouldn't be so much moral code, but it would be Christ-like.
Yeah, and that's my standard. Away from all of the nuance, the original kind of disagreement was just that in general, no nuance, but in general, I don't think women should be necessarily held on average to submit to a man who is not submitting to Christ. Because I feel that the biblical model of submission, it is in every scenario chronological, I guess you could say, from Christ down to wife. And in every scenario is a wife responding to a man submitting. It's always a woman responding with submission to the man who is already submitting to Christ.
Yeah.
Give me 2 seconds. Hold on. My house is under construction, and my door that I propped
I'm
up,
so sorry.
it just fell down. So just give me literally 1 minute. I'll be right back.
My bad. Ladies, where y'all at though? You need to get on this shop because I know people disagree with me, Ruth or whoever.
Okay, we're good. We're good. Sorry. So does that clear it up? I guess my end of it.
To some degree.
Just on average, because I know you have very specific kind of experiences. But if you and I were writing a book together that was for the average Christian woman,
oh God,
that's kind of, I think, that's how we should approach it. Ruth said she agrees
with you, right?
Yeah, but I agree with you when it becomes nuanced. That's why maybe let's remove the nuance first and just cover the general, and then maybe go back into the nuance, because hitting the nuance first is what we've been doing, and it gets very confusing, and then you bounce around and stuff. And I agree with a lot of your points. I think you and I would be absolutely in agreement on a lot of the nuanced things. But just in general, we're writing a book for Christian women. What would you disagree with me, or would your chapter look different?
I mean, I guess it would look a little bit different, because it sounds like when it comes to things that are pertaining to an alignment with God, right, and morality and those things, then yeah, you should be in complete agreement. You know what? I think overall there's also we have like the pastoral epistles, right, where it talks about the elders kind of teaching the younger women or the next generation how to submit to their husbands.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that's huge that gets missed a lot. I would have really appreciated someone who was older telling me, like, hey girl, hey baby girl, this is too far, with the receipts, or this part is too far, or different things like that. And I don't think there's enough fellowship and discipleship amongst the body of Christ to kind of help that happen.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that's kind of one aspect that would really help with a lot of these gray areas. I remember at one point my ex-husband said, like, hey, I don't want to see a marriage counselor who's either Christian or not of the faith. I want to see someone who's Catholic and who's a man. I was like, okay, because he thought maybe everyone was sexist or biased or whatever. And then I remember we finally went to a male Catholic marriage counselor who begged me to get a divorce. And called him out on yeah, I know, right? It was so sad. That was kind of like, yeah, that was sort of like the nail in the coffin for me. And kind of told him off in front of me. So it's not like, I didn't say anything, but yeah, I don't know. There's just a lot of gray. And like I said, there should be some things within reason, but I don't think that to some degree, because your husband is not completely submitting or yielding to God, that you need to,
Well, let's say let's say not at all. Your husband says he's a Christian, but if you were to take an inventory of his character, his behavior, his actions, outside of what he says, so screw what he says, because that's meaningless.
Okay.
But the rest, he's not conveying himself as a Christian at all. He just wears the label. Would most women, most on average, outside of nuance, should they be held to submit to that man still?
I still think so.
Okay. I mean, I think it's interesting. If nothing else, I think
outside
it's really
of abuse. Yeah, like I know some women. Oh my God, I feel like I'm throwing my people under the bus. Yeah, so I'm pretty good at being a submissive wife. I personally don't like being the boss. It's just a lot of work and it's really draining and depleting. Um, but I know there's some men that I know where the woman was like the head and she kind of ran everything, right? And the man just refused to take the lead in general.
Yeah.
With anything and everything. Like I've seen that. There's some men where I don't know what the fuck is wrong with them, where they just prefer that the woman run the show, or the woman prefers it. I don't really know. I don't understand it. But in situations like that, I don't agree with it. Like the wanting of control, like, baby girl, you're not designed for that. It's freaking hella stressful. I know, because I'm thrusted into that. You know what I mean? Like, I hate being a single mom. I hate calling all the shots and every shots, and not have anyone to kind of back me up or bounce ideas off of. That's a lot of responsibility that I don't think I'm responsible for.
Yeah.
And hell, my kids didn't even really listen. They were listening to their dad, but definitely not me. Mom is the nice one.
That's an interesting point. I think that's a really good thing to bring up, because that does exist. So, and I
Yeah.
think we've talked about it very, very briefly, but we never like had a long conversation about it. So there, it's one thing that I agree with you. It's something that I complain about on the internet quite often, that these, and I think it's a part of kind of what we're talking about, but I think it's the symptom of the problem, and the problem, and
Like culture.
the culture, yes, but like more specified is like the reason we're talking about what we're talking about to begin with is that I believe men are failing, and not masculinity. To me, masculinity is tied to Christ. Like that's masculinity, because he was a very beautiful mixture of like rebel, badass, standing for what is objectively moral, and
And
not,
meekness.
and yeah, and also meekness and compassion and understanding and emotional intelligence. I see that as masculinity, which is why I think people like Andrew Tate and people like a lot of like the red pill manosphere thing that are pushing masculinity it's a garbage version of masculinity. It's all of the cool stuff of masculinity with none of like the parts that would actually make a woman comfortable submitting to you. And so it's created like a very odd culture, in my opinion. It's created a very odd culture. But
So
go ahead.
it's the polarity of femininity.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
got
And
it.
I think one of the symptoms of this is that we have the role reversal. Whereas
Mhm.
I'm sure it existed all throughout history, but it was probably very, very marginal. And now it's very, very common, because and yeah, it's like a much broader issue, because now gender is a very confusing thing, and everything in culture is totally twisted. But even if you like just narrow it into this, Christian marriages where the woman is wearing the pants, so to speak, and the man is
Right.
just kind of submissively following along and nodding his head, is, in everybody's opinion, do you guys think this is a viable option for Christians if they choose it? Because like there are a lot of men who are just kind of meek and submissive, and they, a lot of the time, they will end up with a woman
Gross.
who is more
Dominant.
a
Yeah.
dominant
Ew.
and aggressive, because it's just how it lands a lot, inside and outside of religious marriages. You tend to attract the other because it completes the relationship. But I believe it's the result of of the genders not doing what they're called to do, and not filling the roles that they're called and designed to fill. So if a man is being too effeminate, which he shouldn't be, then the women have to be sort of masculine, because
Uh,
the men lack masculinity. I don't agree with it. I'm saying this is like how it happens. I think
I
that's
don't
how
know
it
that
happens.
it has. I think a lot of it, like I said, is kind of character and what. Okay, so here's another thing. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I must admit this to you guys. Once upon a time, I married a second time to a white guy, to an Irish guy, right? And his mom was really bossy and controlling of her husband and her sons. It was really, really weird. And the dad was like a Vietnam War veteran. How you emasculate a Vietnam War veteran? I don't freaking know. But I remember it was really there was a lot of uncomfortable conversations that he and I had when it came to making major decisions. I felt like he did a great job with leading with meekness and masculinity. Um, but I definitely know that it wasn't modeled for him. And I think that in the long run, it really caused a lot of hindrances. Like, for example, I remember him trying to pick out medical insurance for our family. And he kind of gave me like 3 different options. And I kind of gave my input on each of them. And I remember telling him, like, yeah, well, these two seem kind of similar. And I think they're the best option. But at the end of the day, it's up to you, whatever you think. And I remember him being terrified to make like the final decision. And he's like, well, can't you just, tell me what to do? And I'm like, no, I don't do that. Like that's kind of like, bro, that's your job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember to some degree, I don't know what it's like for men, but it almost like he seemed afraid of having to be the one that was responsible for everything and was kind of afraid of backlash, which was weird because I wasn't like that. That's not my personality. That's not how I am. But it was definitely what he was used to and what was modeled to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's part of the problem for sure.
Yeah. Oh, good, Ruth. Okay. Go ahead, Ruth. Or
let me see. All right, Ruth, you'll be up in just a second. There you are.
Hi, you wanted to know what I meant about the tools we're given.
Yeah, just add more context.
Yeah, I used to, my mom growing up, my mom was, she was abused with religion. She, beatings, things like that. She was raised like that, very fearful, very, I don't know, fear of God. Like she had the fear of God beat into her, basically. So these are the tools my mom is given to be our mother and a wife. And I used to be kind of bitter, bitter about my upbringing because she just did what she knew. And it wasn't until I took psychology that I learned that we're given tools, so to speak, and how to live our life through our upbringing.
Yeah.
And unless we're taught any different or experiencing anything different or have that better influence in our life, we're never going to know. So the tools, like the tools we are given, this like Ghost brought up, it'd be nice if children were taught from a young age how to be Christ-like and how to love like that. And that would be great. But people only have the tools that they're given to teach. And many people don't have those correct tools to teach Christ-like things. And that's all I wanted to say. And I wanted to say that I agreed with you. I learned it in Bible study. Our group Bible study a few years ago. I had a question because I initiated my divorce with my first husband. And I guess you would say that I was submissive to him until dark stuff started happening and I had to get out. And so that was always an issue with me because it says in the Bible, if you get divorced, you're not to marry again unless you get back with your husband.
Mm-hmm.
And that was never going to happen ever. And then I get married again. And then I start going to church again and doing Bible study. And I'm, have like a million questions as usual. And so they did a Bible study on it. And we on the whole submission thing. And they're like, it's logical. if he's not treating you in a godly way with God's love, which is I will die for you kind of love. I will lay down my coat so you don't get your foot in the mud puddle. I mean, I know some gentlemen like that, but it's like that's old school gentlemanly stuff. But if they're not going to treat you with that love of God, you do not have to submit to ungodly requests, ungodly, if you don't get that love from them. It's like, that would be horrible though. That would be horrible being in a relationship with that. But I don't know. And then I got in my new marriage, I was totally submissive unless he was being illogical. He struggled with bipolar. So he was very illogical at times. And so I would have to confront him and butt heads and yeah, that was my experience. But it made me a stronger person.
Yeah.
Dealing with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Big time.
So I've if tell me if I'm off base with this. If what I'm gathering is like a thesis within what you're saying would be like if your husband is a non-believer or a believer who is not reflecting the faith, you can leave him. That's if there's directive not to divorce, but there is directive that you are free to divorce if it's to a non-believer. You guys know I'm very radical about this, where I think if somebody's not living the life of a Christian, I don't feel like they're a Christian. And I understand some people disagree with me, but based on my belief, I would say that if your husband is not a believer, which is somebody who's not reflecting Christ, because Christian means you have to be reflecting Christ. So if your husband is not a believer because he is not reflecting Christ, you can biblically divorce him. I don't think you have to submit because of that, but you should also leave him. It just made me think of that, and I think I never came full circle with it, and that made me come full circle with it in my head. So yeah, I don't think you should submit because he's not being Christ-like, which means to me he's not a Christian. But I also think then you should divorce him. You shouldn't stay married to him. I'm really glad you came and said all that, because it forced it to come full circle in my own head. So I guess that would be kind of the full circle of the view for me.
And a lot of people like my pastor friend, we've become buddies because we're both preachers' kids and we compare stories, but it's like he was astonished that I stayed with my husband with his condition. Because his son is bipolar, and he said if I was his wife, I would leave him. But it's like, he says he feels so bad for his daughter and his daughter-in-law, and but it's like he was just like, he was astonished. He said you stayed with him, and he's just like, wow, he couldn't believe it. And but yeah, I ran away from one relationship that turned dark, but I wasn't going to run away from a husband who showed me love in his own way. He had a heart of gold. He was so kind-hearted, but he had this disease that would rear its ugly head. And I wasn't going to leave him because he was sick like that,
Yeah.
So we made our marriage work. We made it. What do you call it? Make it make.
Yeah.
That's what we did. He did everything to not drive me crazy and drive himself crazy, So we made it work. But it was a very weird relationship, a lot of alone time.
Yeah.
So,
I would imagine.
But it worked, and he was a very good provider, and very good provider he was, and he was strong all the way to the end. So he passed away in October of 22. of cancer. And so I've just been trying to adjust to life since then.
Rough.
And it's getting better every day. Yeah. So at least he's not suffering anymore, because he suffered so long. He was in pain for so long. So I took care of him. And so I guess that's being submissive, right? Is taking care of your in sickness and health.
Absolutely.
So, but that's, that's my story. I didn't want to go into the ugly, dark stuff, but I wanted to say I did not stay in that marriage, and I struggled with that
Yeah.
after I started not being a backslidden Christian anymore. So, I mean, does that pertain to backslidden Christians? I don't know. But I left the church for the longest time, and it's been just like 12 years since I've been back in church. So
We all have our ups and downs. I don't know that it's considered backslidden though.
yeah, well, when you're not, like, I don't know, you can be a Christian and still, I don't know, people are judgmental about people anyways.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Hey, hold on 1 second. So everybody on YouTube, we're gonna shut off YouTube. So these are gonna run 1 hour flat, and then we're gonna continue in Discord. So the Discord link is at the top, pinned in the chat. It's in the description of the video. It's free. But come to Discord. There's a red section down here, streams and lives. Hit the one where you see all the people in there, and then we're just gonna continue right along for another half hour or so, roughly. But I'm gonna go ahead and shut YouTube off. So if you're staying on YouTube, have a lovely evening.